Bim! Guess what? I thought we'd do it a bit different. We're in a new location. We're not in Downing Street today. We're in the Houses of Parliament, and more specifically, the House of Commons, where common people go to say common things. Talking of whom, just waiting for Bojo to come out and give us the roadmap to what is going to occur with the old lockdown restrictions. It's moderately exciting, and it's incredibly warm in here as well. So I hope it doesn't go for too long, because I'll let you to the secret. This isn't really a shirt and tie. It's a nylon t-shirt, and it's very sweaty. So we're going to wait. They're currently doing some waffle, as you can see. Waffle. So, where am I up to now with Lockdown 3? Lockdown 3 should have started earlier than it did. Boris waited for it to get bad and then did something, but unfortunately, whenever things get bad, they get worse. And we knew it was going to get worse, so we should have done something earlier, but that's by the by. The vaccines are rolling out, and I did say last year that when the vaccines come out, if we did a lockdown from December to the end of February, early March, that'd probably be the last lockdown, because the most people would have had the vaccinations. Now we've slipped that on a month, but he wants to get schools back. I kind of see why, but there's other things that need going back as well, but we don't want to rush into it. We rushed into it last time and it didn't go well for anyone, so fingers crossed. Boris has listened and watched some of my videos and has realised that well, he needs to listen to me and not people like eye testers that go to Barnyard Castle. Yes, Dominic, I'm talking about you. I know he's not there anymore, but I bet he's still at the end of a phone. So, never done a House of Commons one before, and we're actually on the House of Commons YouTube channel, or the Houses of Parliament's YouTube channel. So, hopefully they can get it sorted. They've still not sorted out that thing. That's really annoys me, that.
Country, the Levelling Up Fund and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund will build on the work of the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund, and the prospectuses for those will be published very soon.
It's annoying.
I hope East
and I don't even have ADHD. If you have ADHD, God, that would drive you insane. Dum 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 dum. So we've got another minute yet before Boris comes on. Pubs and hospitality are saying, oh, well, we want to go back now. No. Because when people get drunk, it's all like, oh, I've not seen you for ages, give us a nugget, do a selfie, and all that kind of gubbins. We don't need that. Dum dum dum. Dum 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 dum. Well, just checking the chat's working, which it is. It's very exciting, this. I'm not doing the 7 o'clock briefing because, to be honest, there's more stuff said at this point than there is then. Dum dum dum, jumpty dumpty dum dum dum. Here is the news, coming to you every hour on the hour. Well, every couple of weeks. Boris is stood in the wings now, look, we can see Boris. We'll go back to the main thing. I'm not listening to what these people are talking about. It could be interesting,
for the
but
rising
I don't
number
really
of
care.
older people with disabilities,
wow,
dementia,
that's
now
a hell of
impacts of long COVID. Will the Secretary of State
router,
commit
isn't it?
to increasing disabled facilities grant funding
That's
so
a
local
piece
authorities
of kit, that
like
is.
Bedford Borough Council
Anyway,
can
wasn't
stand
that
a
we were
chance?
looking at? We're looking at Boris stood in the doorway waiting to come on. Here we go.
The honourable gentleman raised an important point.
Wait for it to go to the other angle so we can see Mr. Speaker. No, not that angle, the other angle so we can see Mr. Speaker.
On how we can
We'll
improve
see Bojo.
access to public buildings and to homes for disabled people. And if there's more that we can do, I think we should do.
Roundabout. Oh. There he is.
Let's head to
No,
government.
there he's not. He was there a second ago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He moved. He's hiding. They're like, go away, Bojo. We don't want you yet. And Bojo's on time. It's this that's running over now. This is why I'm not doing Bojo tonight. Because it's 7 o'clock. And you know what he's like. End up being about God knows when. What they shouldn't do is rush into it now. So yeah, if you get the schools back and then give it a few weeks, get the non-essential retail, give it a few weeks, get outside events, give it a few weeks, and then inside events and see where we're at. But I'll be honest with you, it's not looking good. They're not socially distancing, although it's 1 metre plus, isn't it, when you've got a mask on? Although he hasn't got a mask on.
Councils
Staying
to
though,
work
look,
with
are
them
they-
to discuss
Is
funding.
that Boris who's not
councils in
socially
Devon will
distancing?
receive a further £31 million in unring-fenced COVID funding
Hello,
next
Flink.
year, which will help ensure their facilities are
On my
maintained
regulars.
and ready
Don't
for the
forget to
summer.
subscribe,
And finally,
like,
Mr.
share.
Speaker, can I say that I'm delighted that my honourable
As
friend's
we
constituency
just figure
has
out or
received
just-
an offer
or
of £6.5
find
million
out
from our
what
future
is
high
going
streets
on.
fund, which I understand will go towards
Very,
refurbishment
very
of the town's
exciting.
historic Markets Quarter.
Western.
Oops.
£1,000 on a report with Deloitte's. And whilst I understand what
He looks like what I'd look like if I were bald and wore glasses.
with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Deloitte's found that it would be favourable for one sort of authority. PricewaterhouseCoopers decided that county council should remain as is.
Maybe
Is
not,
that
I
a
don't
good
know.
use of public money?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, these individual decisions are decisions for local authority. I can certainly
I don't
inform
know what
him
they're
that
discussing.
Warwick have
It
received...
looks very exciting. But we're still waiting for Bojo. This is going on for a while. Oh dear. Someone's got rubbish
Build
internet.
and develop 2,500 houses in the village of Horton Heath.
Look at that.
Now, I know the Minister can't comment
be
on
on Virgin
specific
Media,
planning
I think.
applications, but what general advice can he give my constituents who are concerned by the council
His
acting as a
internet cut out.
developer and the planning authority, seemingly while...
I have no idea what's going on. Come on, Boris. We want Boris. We want to know what the roadmap is. Oh, what's happening there? We've gone to a clock. Is that because they're all swapping places? This could be exciting then. This could be Boris. It's not the most delicate of clocks, is it? I'll be honest with you. It's got 2 screws missing as well. And the minute hand isn't pointing at the minute. It's pointing in between the minutes. So just now it's pointing at the minute. It must do it every 30 seconds then. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 12,000, 14,000, 15,000, 16,000, 17,000, 18,000, 19,000, 20,000, 21,000, 22,000, 23,000, 24,000, 25,000, 26,000, 27,000. There you go. So it's every 30 seconds it moves on. So Boris is late. Why are the 2 screws missing? Am I missing something here? Is there no sound at the minute? Oh, here he comes. Oh no, it's Mr. Speaker. This is very exciting. Here comes Bojo. Right, hopefully we'll get sound. If not, I'll have to find another stream for this.
Order. The Prime Minister has given the authority for his statement to last longer than 10 minutes. And Order. Before I call the Prime Minister to address the Chamber, I'd like to point out that a British Sign Language interpretation of the statement is available to watch on the Parliament Live TV. I now call the Prime Minister to make his statement. Prime Minister!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on the roadmap that will guide us cautiously but irreversibly.
What's happened to his hair?
Reclaiming our freedoms while doing all we can to protect our people against COVID. Today's measures will apply in England, but we're working closely with the devolved administrations who are setting out similar plans.
Yeah.
The threat remains substantial, with the numbers in hospital only now beginning to fall below the peak of the first wave in April.
Yes.
But we're able to take these steps because of the resolve of the British public and the extraordinary success of our NHS in vaccinating more than 17.5 million people across the UK.
Right.
The data so far suggests both vaccines are effective against the dominant strains of COVID.
Yep.
Public Health England has found that 1 dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine reduces hospitalisations and deaths by at least 75%.
Yep.
And early data suggests that the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine provides a good level of protection, though since we only started deploying this vaccine last month, at this stage the size of its effect is less certain.
That's what my mother had.
But no vaccine can ever be 100% effective. Not everyone will take them up, and like all viruses, COVID-19 will mutate. So
like your hair.
Modelling released by Sage today shows.
I mean, I cut my own hair, but I think I do a better job than that.
Lifting lockdown will result in more cases, more hospitalisations, and sadly, more deaths. And this would happen whenever lockdown is lifted, whether now or in 6 or 9 months, because there will always be some vulnerable people who are not protected by the vaccines. There is therefore no credible route to a zero COVID Britain, or indeed a zero COVID world. And we cannot persist.
This is stuff we all know already, isn't it?
Restrictions that debilitate our economy, our physical and mental well-being, and the life chances of our children. And that is why it is so crucial that this roadmap should be cautious, but also irreversible. We're setting out on what I hope and believe is a one-way road to freedom.
Yeah, because you've rushed it before and completely screwed it up.
Possible by the pace of the vaccination programme.
Which is the only thing they've done right.
In England, everyone in the top 4 priority groups was successfully offered a vaccine by the middle of February. We now aim to offer a first dose to all those in groups 5 to 9 by the 15th of April, and I'm setting another stretching target to offer a first dose to every adult by the end of July.
Wow.
As more of us are inoculated, so the protection afforded by the vaccines will gradually replace the restrictions. And
yes.
Today's roadmap sets out the principles of that transition. The level of infection is broadly similar across England, so we will ease restrictions in all areas at the same time.
Which is the only way to do it.
Will be driven by the evidence.
The problem with the tiers were
outdoor activity will be prioritised as the best way
you'd have
to restore freedom.
Like one area that was the lower tier and all the areas around there were high tiers, and everyone would just go to the low area and then
our decisions will be led
look at London,
by
look at
data,
Liverpool.
Not dates, and subjected to 4 tests. First, that the vaccine deployment programme continues successfully.
Obviously.
Second, that evidence shows vaccines are sufficiently effective in reducing hospitalisations.
They've got new advisors because this is making sense.
Third, that infection rates do not risk a surge in hospitalisations which would put unsustainable pressure on the NHS.
Yes.
And fourth, that our assessment of the risks is not fundamentally changed by new variants of COVID that cause concern.
Yeah, that's the other issue, isn't it?
Before
if
taking each
gets
step,
a variant,
we will review the data against these tests. And because it takes at least 4 weeks for the data to reflect the impact of
which is what we've been saying all along,
in restrictions, and we want to give the country a week's notice before each change, there will be at least 5 weeks between each step. The Chief Medical Officer is clear that moving any faster would mean acting before we know the impact of each step.
Which is my argument of why we're in the situation we're in now, because
and reimpose restrictions.
They know it takes 4 weeks for the actions,
that risk.
But they let it get to crisis and then do lockdown, and it just gets worse.
By which time those in the top 4 priority groups will be benefiting from the increased protection they receive from their first dose of the vaccine. Mr. Speaker, all the evidence shows that classrooms are the best places for our young people to be, and that's why I've always said that schools would be the last to close and the first to reopen.
I thought it was going to be the last to reopen.
And based on our assessment of the current data against the 4 tests, I can tell the House that 2 weeks from today, pupils and students in all schools and further education settings can safely return to face-to-face teaching, supported by twice-weekly testing of secondary school and college pupils.
Oh.
Right. Childcare bubbles will also be encouraged to get tested regularly. Breakfast and after-school clubs can also reopen, and other children's activities, including sport, can restart where necessary to help parents to work. Students on university courses requiring practical teaching, specialist facilities, or on-site assessments will also return. But all others will need to continue learning online, and we will review the options for when they can return by the end of the Easter holidays. From the 8th of March, people will also be able to meet one person from outside their household for outdoor recreation, such as a coffee on a bench or a picnic in a park, in addition to exercise.
One person.
But we're advising the clinically extremely vulnerable to shield at least until the end of March. Every care home resident will be able to nominate a named visitor able to see them regularly, provided they're tested and wear PPE. And finally, we will amend regulations to enable a broader range of COVID-secure campaign activities for local elections on the 6th of May. As part of step 1, we will go further and make limited changes on 29th of March when schools go on Easter holidays. It will become possible to meet in limited numbers outdoors where the risk is lower. So the rule of 6 will return outdoors, including in private gardens, and outdoor meetings of 2 households will also be permitted on the same basis so that families in different circumstances can meet. Outdoor sports facilities such as tennis and basketball courts and open-air swimming pools will be able to reopen, and formally organised outdoor sports will resume, subject to guidance. From this point, the 29th of March, people will no longer be legally required to stay at home, but many lockdown restrictions will remain. People should continue to work from home where they can and minimise all travel wherever possible. Step 2 will begin at least 5 weeks after the beginning of Step 1 and no earlier than the 12th of April, with an announcement at least 7 days in advance. If analysis of the latest data against the 4 tests requires a delay, then this and subsequent steps will also be delayed to maintain the 5-week gap. In step 2, non-essential retail will reopen, as will personal care, including hairdressers, I'm glad to say, and nail salons. Indoor leisure facilities such as gyms will reopen, as will holiday lets, but only for use by individuals or household groups. We will begin to reopen our pubs and restaurants outdoors, and honourable members will be relieved there will be no curfew and the Scotch egg debate will be over, because there will be no requirement for alcohol to be accompanied by a substantial meal. Zoos, theme parks and drive-in cinemas will reopen, as will public libraries and community centres. Step 3 will begin no earlier than the 17th of May. Provided the data satisfies the 4 tests, most restrictions on meetings outdoors will be lifted, subject to a limit of 30, and this is the point when you will be able to see your friends and family indoors, subject to the Rule 6 or the meeting of 2 households. We will also reopen pubs and restaurants indoors, along with cinemas and children's play areas, hotels, hostels and B&Bs, theatres and concert halls will reopen their doors. And the turnstiles of our sports stadia will once again rotate, subject in all cases to capacity limits depending on the size of the venue. And we will pilot larger events using enhanced testing with the ambition of further easing of restrictions in the next step. Step 4 will begin no earlier than the 21st of June. With appropriate mitigations, we will aim to remove all legal limits on social contact, and on weddings and other life events, we will reopen everything up to and including nightclubs, and enable large events such as theatre performances above the limits of Step 3, potentially using testing to reduce the risk of infection. Mr. Speaker, our journey back towards normality will be subject to resolving a number of key questions, and to do this, we will conduct 4 reviews. 1 will assess how long we need to maintain social distancing and face masks. This will also inform guidance on working from home, which should continue wherever possible until this review is complete.
The face masks are with us for years.
Determining how Parliament can safely return in a way that I know honourable members would wish. A second review will consider the resumption of international travel, which is vital for many businesses which have been hardest hit, including retail, hospitality, tourism and aviation. A successor to the Global Travel Task Force will report by the 12th of April so that people can plan for the summer. The third review will consider the potential role of COVID status certification in helping venues to open safely, but mindful of the many concerns surrounding exclusion, discrimination and privacy. And the fourth review will look at the safe return of major events. Mr. Speaker, as we proceed through these steps, we will benefit from the combined protection of our vaccines and the continued expansion of rapid testing. We will extend the provision of free test kits for workplaces.
Must admit, I've not had a test at all yet.
And
I don't know many other people have not had a test, but I've never had one.
Can collect those tests from local testing sites. Mr. Speaker, in view of these cautious but I hope irreversible changes, people may be concerned
but I live on my own,
about
and I very rarely go out, so
for the various support packages for livelihoods, for people and for the economy. So I want to reassure the House, we will not pull the rug out. For the duration of the pandemic, the government will continue to do whatever it takes to protect jobs and livelihoods across the UK. And my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will set out further details in the budget next Wednesday.
Oh.
Finally, Mr. Speaker,
get rid of business rates, that's all I ask for.
To the constant mutations of the virus. Next month we will publish an updated plan for responding to local outbreaks, with a range of measures to address variants of concern, including surge PCR testing and enhanced contact tracing. We can't, I'm afraid, rule out reimposing restrictions at local or regional level if evidence suggests they are necessary to contain or suppress a new variant which escapes the vaccines. Mr. Speaker, I know there will be many people.
The only way you can do that is to put a 100-mile radius on wherever the outbreak is.
And that it is arrogant to impose any kind of plan upon a virus. And I agree that we must always be humble in the face of nature, and we must be cautious.
He needs a new suit. That suit's
but I really
not
also
doing him any favours, is it?
That the vaccination programme has dramatically changed the odds in our favour, and it is on that basis that we can now proceed. And of course, Mr. Speaker, there will be others who will believe that we could go faster on the basis of that vaccination programme.
But they're idiots. Oh, vaccination. Yeah.
And I sympathise very much with the exhaustion and the stress that people are experiencing and that businesses are
I think this time he's doing it right.
So long.
I never thought I'd say that.
But to them, and to them all, I say that today the end really is in sight, Mr. Speaker. And a wretched year will give way to a spring and a summer that will be very different and incomparably better than the picture we see around us today. And in that spirit, Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Leader of the Opposition.
No, here we go, Keir Starmer. Thank you for letting me have a look at this first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement and for the telephone call between us earlier today. Mr. Speaker, this is the third time the Prime Minister has announced a plan to come out of national lockdown. In the past, we've emerged without sufficient caution, without a clear plan, and without listening to the science. We can't afford to make those mistakes again. This has to be the last lockdown. Now, the vaccine rollout, as the Prime Minister said, has been remarkable, and I want to pay tribute to everybody involved. It is the light at the end of the tunnel.
He always sounds like he's got a blocked up nose, doesn't he?
We have to tread very carefully. So I'm glad the Prime Minister spoke today of caution, of this being irreversible, of assessing the data and following the evidence. Those are the right guiding principles. And I have to say it's a welcome change from some of the language the Prime Minister's used in the past. And I urge the Prime Minister now to stick to that. Turning to the substance of the matter, first, schools. We all agree that the priority must be for all children to be back in school as quickly as possible and to stay in school. We want that to happen on March the 8th, as the government has promised. Confidence of parents, teachers and school staff will be critical. So can the Prime Minister please confirm that the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Officer support the full reopening of all schools on March the 8th? And will he commit to publishing all the relevant medical evidence on this issue? Can the Prime Minister also indicate what the government is doing to overcome the huge logistical challenges this presents? The Prime Minister touched on mass testing in his statement, but there was nothing on Nightingale classrooms and extra capacity. This is a huge problem, particularly for schools with smaller buildings. So can the Prime Minister update the House on how he's going to deal with this in just over 2 weeks' time? Let me turn to a linked issue. Within weeks of schools returning last autumn, thousands of teachers and school staff were self-isolating, causing huge disruption to the running of schools and children's learning. We don't want that again. That's why we called for the early vaccination of all teachers and school staff. In my own constituency, the fantastic Crick Institute, which has been doing amazing work, has been vaccinating hundreds of people a day. They've been very clear to me and publicly that they could be doing more. And it's obvious to me that over one weekend, they could have vaccinated all teachers and school staff in Camden if they'd been allowed to do so, and without bumping anyone else from the priority list. There are similar examples across the country. So will the Prime Minister see what more can be done to speed up the vaccination of teachers and school staff to ensure that children and young people not only return to school on March the 8th, but stay in school having returned. Let me turn then to isolation support. As we release health measures, however gradually, there's a risk that infection rates will go up. The Prime Minister made that clear in his statement. Therefore, it's more important than ever that test, trace and isolate is working and working well. One of the most concerning figures in a recent SAGE report is that only 3 in 10 people who should be self-isolating are actually doing so. And it's obvious that one of the main drivers of this is insecurity at work. As the chair of Test and Trace has said, people are scared to take the test because they can't afford to self-isolate. That not only harms our health response, it costs the economy too, and it's got to be fixed. We've proposed that the £500 isolation payment, which is currently only available to 1 in 8 workers, be made available to everyone who needs it. Will the Prime Minister consider that? Because if we don't shift the 3 in 10 figure, there'll be a huge hole in our defences. Third, Mr. Speaker, economic support. The Prime Minister announced a roadmap today, but it won't have escaped businesses that many of them will not be able to open until mid-April at the earliest, and many until mid-June. Now, I'm not questioning the health basis for that decision, which I support. But I am reiterating what we've always said, that health restrictions must be accompanied by proper economic support. And it makes no sense to announce today that businesses will be closed for many more weeks or months without announcing new economic support at the same time. The Prime Minister says, well, the budget will be next week. But there's nothing stopping him saying today that business rates relief will be extended, that furlough will be extended, or that the VAT cut for hospitality and leisure will also be extended. Businesses are crying out for that certainty, and the Prime Minister should give it to them today.
I'm not that arsed,
The Prime Minister should also announce proper support for the 3 million self-employed who've been left out of all support for the last year. This morning on LBC,
I've had a couple of grants,
asked
but that's about as far as it's gone.
By a self-employed businesswoman who's at her wit's end at the lack of government support. This roadmap means that she may not be able to get up and running again in her business until mid-June. So surely the Prime Minister needs to act now to close the gaps for these 3 million. Mr. Speaker, we support the twin principles that the Prime Minister has set out today, that lifting of restrictions must be both cautious and irreversible. But I know the Prime Minister will come under pressure from those on his own benches to go faster and to throw caution to the wind. Last week it was reported that around 60 of his own members of Parliament called for the end of all restrictions by the end of April. I'm sure there are going to be similar calls this afternoon. I hope the Prime Minister takes the opportunity to face this down. Because if this roadmap is to work, he needs to listen to the Chief Scientific Officer and the Chief Medical Officer.
We've got to take our time with it, yes.
Not the honourable members for Wickham or the Forest of Dean. If the Prime Minister does, he will have our support and will secure a majority in the House. If he does not, we will waste all the sacrifices of the last 12 months. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That was brilliant.
Well, I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman for his overall support for the roadmap, and indeed I welcome his support for the vaccine rollout, and I'm sure that many people will be glad to hear what he says. I can't help but reminding you, Mr. Speaker, that the right honourable gentleman did vote to stay in the European Medicines Agency, which would have made a vaccine rollout at this speed impossible, Mr. Speaker. And he's right to say that it's a priority to get schools back safely, and I'm delighted that he agrees with that. And I can certainly say that plan for March the 8th for all schools back on March the 8th is supported by the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor, and it would be a good thing if he could perhaps persuade some of his friends in the unions to say so as well, Mr. Speaker. And finally, to say that schools are safe. He mentions self-isolation, the importance of self-isolation, and we will continue to support those who are asked to self-isolate and indeed increase our package of support for them, as for support for business, for the self-employed, which he rightly raises. We will continue to put our arms around businesses and livelihoods around the countries that we have done throughout the pandemic, and the Chancellor, who has been extremely creative in this respect, will be setting out the details in the budget next week, as he would expect. Mr. Speaker, overall, I think we can safely say that we've had cautious support from the leader of the opposition today. The bitter experience has taught me that his support is very far from irreversible, Mr. Speaker. Who knows what he will be saying next week, but I'm glad of it today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer the House to my entry in the Members' Register. Can I say to my right honourable friend that I welcome his statement today. I particularly welcome the return to schools on March the 8th. But there's another sector which is important for jobs in my constituency, which is fundamental to our economy and critical for global Britain, the aviation sector. He says there's going to be a task force report by the 12th of April so people can plan for the summer. That won't allow people to plan. At every stage,
sat behind her.
The government has taken weeks from these reports to actually provide certainty to the industry. The industry needs 3 months preparation from the point of certainty. So I ask my right honourable friend to look again at this timetable for that task force report, to bring it forward so we can open up our international air travel and make sure that Britain is open for business.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend, and she is quite rightly, Mr. Speaker, a doughty campaigner for the aviation industry and all it brings to our country. And what I can tell her is that we will continue to support that industry throughout these difficult times, but I believe that setting a deadline of April the 12th for the report of the Travel Task Force, the newly formed...
I think that's enough of that, isn't it?
...will give people
just like
time
I can't hear what you're saying
to
because
make
I'm
their
on a different
plans
page.
for the summer, and if things go well, Mr. Speaker, if we can meet
still thinks she should be down there and not him, but she messed Brexit
dates,
up.
Then I do believe there is every chance of
keep going on about having Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister of Labour
the
had won.
of the SNP.
But God, what if Theresa May had still been in? Oh, it's Scottish Angry Guy.
Led
I've
by
got to listen to Scottish
our
Angry
incredible
Guy.
NHS staff is something to behold and something that we are all thankful for. For the first time in many months, people across these islands are genuinely hopeful that an end to the current level of lockdown is finally in sight. But people also know that there is one major threat that could undo much of this hope. The spread of new international variants of this virus now poses the single biggest threat to finally getting out of this pandemic. That is why quarantine measures for international arrivals is so important. We simply can't afford to get this wrong.
Polar opposite for what Theresa May said.
The Scottish Government has taken tough but absolutely necessary action. Those arriving in Scotland on an international flight have to quarantine in a hotel for 10 days. In England, though, the policy only applies to people travelling from red list countries. But, Mr. Speaker, the evidence shows that people across the United Kingdom are demanding stronger measures to prevent the threat of any new variant. YouGov polling last week showed that only 18% support the UK government's rules on quarantine, while a massive 72% of people across the United Kingdom prefer the Scottish Government's comprehensive approach. Prime Minister, your plan to end lockdown will be worthless if your insufficient quarantine measures allow a new variant in through the back door. People right across the United Kingdom are continuing to make huge sacrifices. Children are not yet physically at school. Families are isolated. There is a loneliness epidemic. People are really struggling, and this can't be all for nothing. Do not leave the back door open. Do not risk all the hard work, all the sacrifices that have been made. Given all that is at stake, can you explain why the UK government is failing to introduce the strong quarantine measures that the public across the United Kingdom are demanding? Will the Prime Minister think again and introduce the Scottish Government's comprehensive approach for international travellers? Let us all do what we need to in order to drive down the spread of the virus, to get us all to a position
actually where we can agree with him
and begin to restore social interaction for all our well-being.
Mr. Speaker, we have amongst the toughest quarantine measures anywhere in the world, as the right honourable gentleman well knows. including the mandatory incarceration in hotels appointed by the government if you return from one of the 33 red list countries, as he well knows.
You look at the Isle of Man and you look at New Zealand and all that, which are islands.
People coming into this country. He should
just
also
shut your
know
borders.
That the new variants we are confident that all our vaccines are effective in reducing death and serious disease.
Anyway, that is
and
definitely
we have
it.
no reason to doubt
so thank you very much for watching. If you still are, don't forget to like, share, subscribe,
as well,
and see what I think of the next political COVID reaction. A big shout out to Flink for saying hello. No one else spoke today. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and until next time.